9:07 a.m., a man in a neon vest stapled an eviction notice to the front of my grandmother's house. At 9:09, the pass knocked harder. I didn't hear a voice. I heard a clink the old blue mason jar behind the stove, nudging the backsplash like it had never liked the way I stacked the pots. I set down the notice and slid the stove a few inches. The jar was there, where Grandma Jo kept sugar for sweet tea and secrets for rainy days. Under the jar, a folded scrap of oilcloth. Inside, a letter, brown and soft, the paper kind that holds on to years. On the outside, in my grandmother's looping hand, for Naima, when the men in hats come with papers and smiles. Don't smile back. Look under the stars. Before I go any further, hello, dear listeners. I'm Nima Carter. I'm 52, and I live in a 2-story shotgun house on Paradise Alley in Eastview. The same house my grandmother Josephine bought with church bake sale money and 2 janitor jobs in 1949. If you're here with me now, subscribe so you don't miss the next story, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It still amazes me how far a block like ours can travel on a wire. The man in the vest knocked again. I opened the door. He lowered his eyes like boys do when they're paid to break news to their elders. "Mrs. Carter?" he asked. "Miss," I said. "And you can pin your paper to the porch rail. My paint won't cry." He cleared his throat. "The Redevelopment Authority posted 30-day notices for the Paradise Corridor," he recited. "All structures must be vacated by the 15th. You can contact this number to learn about relocation stipends." Relocation stipends. That's what they call a handful of dollars meant to make you forget where your sleep smells like fried onions and rain. "You can tell the Redevelopment Authority," I said, "that my grandmother paid this house off the year before she died, and nobody called it a corridor back then. It was a block. It was neighbors. It was ours." He swallowed, pinned the paper where I'd asked, and walked away. He never looked back. They rarely do. I sat at the kitchen table with the letter, and the oilcloth, and my granddaughter's cereal bowl, still half full, because she never finishes the last 2 spoons. My granddaughter, Tiana, is 16. Her mother, my daughter Key, is in Atlanta, doing hair and hustling toward a dream that keeps shifting just out of reach. Tiana lives with me because she blooms here like collards in full sun. She walked in her school uniform and saw the paper on the porch through the screen. "Gentrification," she said, deadpan, like it was a word you could hold by the scruff. "Eviction," I said. "Different suit. Same teeth." She picked up Grandma Jo's letter and read the outside. "Under the stars." Grandma always called that quilt on her bed the stars, I said. "Maybe she left." "Something." Tiana arched an eyebrow. "Like what? Gold bars? A magic deed?" She smiled, but her eyes weren't smiling. "It's not funny when the wolf puts his paw on your threshold and calls it policy." We went up the stairs to my room, Grandma Jo's room before mine. The quilt was there on the bed, blue and white and worn thin where hands had rubbed. While talking to babies and God, my grandma sewed it. The spring the magnolias bloomed like saucers. She'd say, "If they take my words, they can't take my stitches." I slipped my fingers under the edge and felt, not fabric dash paper. We laid the quilt flat, and Tiana slid the seam ripper as carefully as if she were undoing a wedding dress. Inside the binding, wrapped in wax paper and hope, was a stack of documents and another note. This one dated June 2nd, 1961. "Naima, if you are holding this, ups, it means somebody who doesn't know our names has a plan for our street. Your granddaddy and me and 8 other families put our names on a deed together in 1947, the Paradise Improvement Society. The lawyer said Heirs property. I said family. The paper says if the heirs stick together, the block can't be taken by nobody without all our say-so. The city will try a quiet title. Don't let him get quiet. Make noise. Go to the old church basement and look behind the hymnals. I put a copy of the map under the star that's missing its point. Love, Joe. I felt like laughing and crying and whooping all at once. Tiana beat me to it. Grandma Joe was a boss, she said, under the hymnals. That is some Harriet Tubman energy. We went to Pilgrim Baptist's basement, where the smell is always bleach and faint fried fish, no matter what you do. In the old cabinet with the hymnals, taped to the back with yellow tape, and war was a map. An honest-to-God plot map. Paradise Alley, 12 parcels, cross-hatched in Grandma Joe's neat X's. In the top corner, signatures. Josephine Carter, Otto James, Millie, and Frank McRae. 6 more names I recognized from recipes and funeral programs. At the bottom, a clause in the lawyer's fine print handwriting. Conveyance held in trust for descendants. Pursuant to bylaws of the Paradise Improvement Society. Transfer valid only with consent of majority of named heirs or their descendants. In the event of absence or death of named parties. Consent shall be determined by a majority of present descendants. Heirs property, Tiana said, pulling out her phone. We learned about that in civics. It's why black folks lose land no will, no clear title. Developers do a quiet title, saying they can't find the family. Then bam, I echoed. Except Grandma Joe wasn't whispering. I ran my finger over her name. She was hollering with pen. We called an emergency meeting the way black women have always called them, group texts. Church announcements, flyers taped to the barbershop mirror and the bodega counter. Bring your grandma's stories and your granddaddy's full name, the flyer said. Bring food if you can. Bring patience. By 6, Pilgrim's basement was breathing. Mrs. Eloise, who used to braid my hair till my scalp shone, sat with a photo of her mama. The McGray's Grey Grill came with a binder. Bless her typesetting soul. A man I didn't know tapped his foot while he recited names like a drumline. And then the door opened, and my past walked in wearing a suit that fit too well. Naima, said Simon. He looked exactly how the city made him, polished, careful, a smile that only moved one corner of his mouth. He used to be my boyfriend in junior college, the kind of boy who could quote Baldwin and fix a carburetor. He left when the city got into his bones and turned him into a redevelopment liaison. I'm here to help, he said, on a personal level. On a personal level, I said, you can sit over there and listen. On a professional one, you can tell your boss I found a deed your contractor's not going to like. He blinked. To his credit, he sat. I told them what we had documents, map, a clause, a letter from a woman who could bake a pie so flaky it made grown men cry. Then I told them what the city had, a plan filed under Chapter 11, a blight designation slapped on our houses without one inspection, a quiet title action filed against unknown heirs. It made the back of my neck prickle hot. We're not unknown, Mrs. Eloise said, voice like the hymn that holds a funeral together. We're right here. We file a list pendants, said the McRae girl, flipping her binder open like a fan. Puts the world on notice that a lawsuit's going on so they can't transfer title while we fight, and we petition the court to intervene as necessary parties. I looked at her the way you look at a child who is both blessing and bridge. What's your name? I asked. Olivia, she said. I'm pre-law, and this is my grandmother's block. Olivia and I and a social worker named Jazz, who knew the courthouse like her own closet, stayed up half play night, writing an emergency petition that said, in so many words, this land was bought by us, for us, held in trust, and you cannot sell a thing that belongs to a choir without first asking the choir where to sit. At 9 the next morning, we filed with the clerk. The clerk read the names on the petition and raised her eyebrows. Paradise Improvement Society, she said. My auntie used to bring me pound cake from a woman on that block. Josephine something. That was my grandma, I said. The clerk smiled a little. Well then, she said, stamping the top of our paper hard enough to bruise. Let's see if this city can still read. We served a notice on the Redevelopment Authority. We took copies to the local paper because the editor owed me 3 favors and 3 chicken dinners. We called a press conference, and my neighbor's 12-year-old nephew live-streamed the whole thing on a phone held together with tape. That's when the trucks started circling. They didn't stop. They didn't honk. They just cruised Paradise slowly in white pickups with logos that looked fresh. Men with clipboards stepped onto porches like they owned them and took pictures they weren't allowed to take. When they pinned red tags on Mr. James's place, house with a porch swing that's held more babies than any chair should I, pulled the tag off and handed it back to the man like a pair of socks he'd dropped. Tiana filmed it all, with that steady millennial calm that takes nonsense and turns it into evidence. At midnight, day 3, the power went out on half the block. I heard a sound by the back fence, the clean click of wire cutters. I walked out with my flashlight and my skillet. We boil gumbo in this, I said, pointing the skillet at the darkness. It can take more heat than you can. The cutters stopped. A figure ran, stumbled, cursed. I didn't give chase. I went home and made tea and rechecked the door locks. I kissed Tiana's forehead as she slept like she did when she was 3, hand open, trusting the air. By day 5, the city blinked. They called a public hearing they hadn't planned on. They posted the notice at 8:15 a.m. for a 3 p.m. hearing the same day, which is one way to rig a room. We brought 50 people anyway, because black folks can find a meeting no matter when you put it. We filled the chamber with church fans and the smell of hair grease and resolute breath. The council chair banged a gavel and said the words that had already been printed in a report. Blight, underutilized, economic engine. I walked to the podium holding Grandma Joe's letter like a Bible. My name is Naima Carter, I said, and my grandmother wrote this with her tax money and her tired hands. This paper says you can't do what your paper says you can, and if you had truly walked Paradise, you would know there is no blight in a pear tree heavy with fruit, or in a stoop where 3 elders play dominoes and talk about the weather and prayer. A man in a trim suit leaned back and whispered to Simon. Simon didn't lean back. He looked at me, and for a second, the boy who could quote Baldwin winced. We didn't win that day. We slowed them. The judge set a preliminary hearing and told the city not to do anything irreversible until then. In our world, that meant they'd try everything they could that wasn't a bulldozer. We tightened up. We built a canopy in the street and moved our meals outside. We started a fund and gave our elders keys to my house and Mrs. Eloise's, because if they cut one line, we'd all wire each other up like a Christmas tree. We knocked on the doors of descendants who lived 3 states away and got aunties on speakerphone and coaxed signatures out of men who said they don't sign nothing and then cry when they raid their grandmamas. Name printed in full on something that mattered. And then came the twist I didn't expect. On the Saturday before our hearing, Tiana was scrolling on her phone, quiet, like hunters get. Grandma, she said, this man on LinkedIn says he closed a Paradise Corridor land assembly for his firm 2 months ago. He's bragging about it. He posted a picture. She showed me the screen. A realtor in a navy suit, shaking hands in front of a map that looked like the one under the Jimenez. Except there's had neat red rectangles where ours had names. The caption read, Thanks to redevelopment partner S. Henderson for smoothing the title issues under Chapter 65. They tagged a law firm. I'd never heard of S. Henderson. Simon, I didn't call him. I printed the post. I printed the tags. I printed the map. On the back, I wrote Grandma's words. Don't let M get quiet. Make noise. On Monday, the courtroom held more of us than it had pews. The judge was a black woman who wore her hair in a bun and her humor like a pearl. She looked at the stack of petitions with so many names, the Staples complained, and asked the city what it thought it was doing. Redevelopment, the city's lawyer said. He smiled a little like he'd practiced it. Within our statutory authority and the quiet title action, she asked. Standard practice when heirs are unknown, he said. She looked at our side. Any heirs unknown in here? She asked. The room laughed. The room cried. A chorus of no. Your Honor rose from throats like a hymn. Then Olivia stood. We move to intervene, she said, as necessary parties. We move to dissolve the quiet title. We move for a temporary injunction stopping any further actions. The judge nodded. Motion granted in part. I'll hear arguments on the quiet title. The city's lawyer rose again. Your Honor, to be blunt, this is a delay tactic. The block is largely underutilized. The tax revenue is to minimize. The judge's eyes cooled. Your bluntness is noted. She turned to me. Miss Carter, do you have exhibits you wish to enter? I handed the bailiff the deed from 1947, the bylaws, the map, the letter, and then I handed him the printout of the LinkedIn post with its shiny brags and small betrayals. The judge held it up. Counsel, she asked, you've already closed the assembly of a block whose title you're in court to contest. The city's counsel coughed. A preliminary draft. Informational session, MMM, the judge said. That M. Hum walked through the room like a woman past due for truth. Let me be plain. You tried to file a quiet title against unknown heirs, whose names are literally stitched into a quilt and taped to a church cabinet. You did it in service of a developer so eager he announced his conquest on the internet, like a man who has never had to walk into a room where people remember his mother's maiden name. You forgot people, counsel. This court has not. She rapped her gavel once. Quiet title is dissolved pending full discovery of heirs and negotiation with the Paradise Improvement Society. Injunction granted. Y'all go talk. We didn't cheer. We breathed. Breathing can feel like electricity when you've held it too long. After, Simon found me on the courthouse steps. He looked smaller than his suit. Naima, he said. You knew, I said. And you didn't come tell me because your job told you not to. He swallowed. I told myself I could change things from the inside, he said. They taught me to say those words like prayer. They're not a prayer, I said. They're a lullaby for people who sleep just fine while the rest of us are awake. He nodded, shame and something like relief sliding across his face. Tell me what you need, he said. From me, your testimony, I said, and your courage. Bring both, we did. He sent us emails he wasn't supposed to have. Memos with phrases like maximize yield and reduce resistance. He stood up in a room where he usually sits and said the city had streamlined the process by only notifying 2 owners when 12 were on the deed, because staff time is limited. He lost his job for it. He gained something his mother would have recognized. Negotiations took 6 months and every inch of patience we had. The developer went quiet after the Attorney General opened a probe funny. How fast silence falls when the law comes tapping. The city changed its tune from vacate to partner. We formed a community land trust, because when you build something off love and paper, give it a name that can stand in the sun. The trust took title to the block. The trust signed a 99-year ground lease to itself, because that's what you do when you intend to live longer than policy cycles. We set rules. No rent gouging, no house flipping, no for sale to highest bidder. We set a board elders. Youth, a carpenter with hands like hammers. Olivia Tiana, who earned her seat with a petition and a speech that made men cry. And me, we rebuilt Mr. James's porch because the swing had finally sighed too deep. We put solar on Mrs. Eloise's roof because the light bill had been disrespectful for years. We painted the stoops, the colors that make joy jump. Mango, cobalt, sunset. On the day the papers recorded. The clerk slid the file across the counter with a smile that reached her eyes. You did your grandma proud, she said. She did herself proud, I said back. We just listened. At the block party that night, Tiana stood on the stoop with a megaphone and a grin. Paradise is not a corridor, she shouted. It's home. I found the man with the neon vest in the crowd. He had a paper plate and a confused smile. You back? I asked. He shrugged. I came for ribs, he said, and to see what happens when people say no. Sometimes no is a full sentence, I said, and gave him extra potato salad because my grandmother taught me that a heart can change faster if you feed it. It would be sweet to end here. Stories love a clean bow. Life doesn't always hand you one. The city still tries to rename us in their memos. The market still salivates. We still litigate like it's a sport. But now, when trucks circle, they slow. When men with clipboards step onto porches, a 10-year-old comes out with his phone on live. When a paper needing a signature appears like rain, we hand it to Olivia, and she reads the fine print like it owes her money. Some nights I sit on the stoop with my quilt on my lap and the hymn of the block in my ears. I run my fingers over the seam Tiana opened and sewed back up, neat as a new promise. I think of Grandma Jo writing under the stars to a granddaughter not yet born. Of her foreseeing a meeting I might not have had the courage to call. I think of Simon asleep some nights like he deserves it, and awake on others like he wants to. Tiana will leave someday to chase a city. It doesn't try to sell itself under her feet. Or maybe she'll stay and change this one from the outside and the inside at once with a stubbornness she inherited fair. Either way, she'll carry a map in her pocket. She know where the hymnals are. If you've stayed with me through this, thank you. If you've got a block, a quilt, a letter, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what's stitched into your seams. Subscribe if you want more, and share this with someone who still thinks quiet titles are polite. When the men in hats come with papers and smiles, don't smile back. Look under the stars.